Nice. I'm just gonna wait like 10 seconds to check. Yes, I see lots of yeses. You can hear but can't speak, Aline. It's too bad. Actually, I wish I could see all of you. Hello, hi. Oh, I see Edna. Hi, Edna. Perfect, nice. Okay. Oh, that's a nice turnout. Cool. All right, so let's get started. Nice. So first of all, I'd like to thank Disal for the opportunity, and also iStudy and Target Language, my estimate partners in crime. Wow, from London, Janaína, nice. Welcome. Okay, this session is going to be recorded, so you guys can spread the word if you like it. And also, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat and see if I can follow through all the questions. But if I can't, I'll try to get back to you somehow. So if you want to later leave a question in the iStudy or Target websites, that would be nice. I can find you there easily. Okay, so here we go. First thing, today's talk is based on 3 pillars, basically. A lot of information on what these authors talk about regarding language awareness. A variety of sources, because Bloom's taxonomy, andragogy, are ideas borrowed from, and the idea of motivation and learning autonomy. Also, there are some quite interesting ideas from the business management and psychology areas. And I'm going to add my personal experience here. If I can contribute a little bit, that would be nice. Hi, Carol Ishiyama, nice. I'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks, probably. All right. So just to map the talk, tips 1, 2, and 3, they're more theoretical. And then tips 4, 5, and 6, they're more practical. Why did I add theoretical stuff? Because I think it's interesting for us to know a little bit about the history and why it's important to know about language awareness nowadays. And my ultimate aim is to inspire participants to continue developing their English language skills and systems in a more autonomous and conscious way. So hopefully you're going to leave here with a few ideas and maybe applicabilities in your daily basis. Sammy, nice to see you. Welcome. Okay. Tip number 1, understand a bit of the history. So why has teacher language awareness become relevant? In other words, why do teachers started to worry about their language skills? Okay, so our area, if you've been a teacher of English, our area actually, the industry took off in the 60s. If you think about it, it's something very recent. So before the 60s, if you could teach the survival English, or if you had like level B1, it would be enough to teach, especially during the war, you know, just literally survival English. But in the 60s, there was a great demand for teachers who could teach lower levels. Also, a number of students, they started to be dissatisfied with untrained teachers. And on the other hand, teachers wanted better salaries. So in the 60s, all this language awareness started to boom. And there were these guys here, 2 icons, Britta and John Haycraft. They were technically the first ones that officially started training teachers to deliver more effective lessons. And look how interesting. It was back in '59. And their school is International House London. So today we can say that it's like the mothership. It's a huge school, a reference everywhere in the world. So their first little course that helped teachers helped teachers teach better and focus on language awareness was called Preparatory Certificate in TOEFL. And in '78, it changed the name to CELTA. So I'm going to give CELTA a little bit of emphasis. And if you don't know much about it, I highly recommend you consider a CELTA or a Delta, and especially in this area of teaching and language awareness. And for an obvious reason, it was one of the first courses that focused on language awareness. The second wave came with the communicative language teaching, the communicative approach, the so famous communicative approach in the '80s. And then there was a huge shift on the focus. So teachers with better language awareness, they got better salaries, they had more satisfied students, and of course, they developed the ability to teach any level. So that's a nice background for us to understand, okay, so why do I need to improve my English? Sometimes the reasons are obvious, but not so much. So here's a little bit of the history. Tip number 2, understand the relevance. So what is teacher language awareness? There are many definitions everywhere, from dictionaries to even Wikipedia. They have lots of definitions, from more casual to more academic, let's say academic. I want to bring you the perspectives from this book here, which is a nice compilation of ideas. This guy here, Stephen Andrews, he managed to put a lot of ideas together, and it makes total sense here. Let me tell you why. So language awareness could be viewed from the perspective of the user. So somebody who speaks the language proficiently, it can be said he has language awareness. This would be like the case of very fluent speakers or native speakers. So from this perspective, they can use idioms, they can use phrasal verbs, they use more elaborate kind of structures. This is one perspective. Another perspective is the analyst, and this is the one that is actually in vogue nowadays. Understanding how the language works. So instead of knowledge of the language, it's knowledge about language. So the analyst is like a person who not only can speak the language, but he can explain things, he can clarify things. He not only uses the phrasal verb, but he knows it's a verb plus a particle, and the particle is an adverb or a preposition, etc. So it's a second perspective. And a third perspective is from teaching, the teacher. So you are language aware when you have a concern with pedagogy and andragogy. So knowledge of the learner. So some people say it doesn't matter if you know the language. If you don't know what your student needs, if you have to slow down, or if you have to speak using more elaborate vocabulary or more basic vocabulary, if you don't have this awareness, you're not language aware, which is nice. It's quite interesting. 3 different perspectives. So what the author says, Andrews, is that actually they all go together. They are interrelated. But what the courses, mainly in Brazil, I think most courses in Brazil, they focus on the analyst to develop this understanding of how language works. Fine, fair enough. But if you can expand to user and teacher, I think you would have a more complete and broad awareness of the language. But of course, we can all start here in the analyst, as This is the main demand in the classroom. The first two, the perspective of the user and the perspective of the analyst, it actually has a straight, direct influence in the reputation of the teacher, his confidence, and trust. So it is important to be an analyst, but you also need to be a user and vice versa. And from this perspective here of language awareness as a teacher, the outcome is you're going to deliver more effective lessons. Students are more motivated. You understand what they need. You understand when you have to grade language, or which activities to choose, or when to correct. So the three of them, the three pillars of the language awareness. Hi, Julio. Nice to see you again. Perfectly said, more effective lessons, students' motivation. Yes, Rita. So guys, overall, when we talk about language awareness, think about these three things. Don't lose track of the teacher in the classroom and also the user. Most focus lately has been on the analyst. Okay, so now we have the big picture. Let's start with the process. So how do I raise language awareness? How does it happen? How do I become a better user, a better analyst, and a better teacher? And in today's session, in particularly with autonomy, how can you do it on your own? Of course, it doesn't mean, guys, that using today's session, you can do everything alone. No, but it's an alternative. So you don't have to depend solely on courses, tutors, certifications. You can. This is going to be the extra work. But ideally, put everything together. If you've been to professional development talks and workshops, they always go together. A little bit of the courses and certificates, and a little bit of your own. So let's take a little look at the process. How does it happen? You know, when you have, everybody knows a friend who went abroad. I put here USA, UK, or Australia. And they go to these places and they want to become fluent and proficient. And they spend years in these countries. So they have the exposure, they have the practice, and they have good models, overall good models, because I mean they're going to be exposed every day. But when you talk to this person, you end up figuring out that this person is actually speaking fluently wrong. So how come if a person who lived abroad, sometimes for years, I know people have been living abroad for speaking English-speaking countries for 8 years, 10 years, and they still cannot manage. Their accuracy is faulty, or pronunciation problems, or they sound a little bit of more like they're speaking Portuguese, like in direct translation. Also, on the other hand, you probably know some people who took all the courses. They went from basic, from elementary to intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 million. And then they took the CPE sometimes, or the CE, but they still make mistakes. They still have some accuracy problems. We have two contexts here. So what happens? Well, one theory is that these people here who lived abroad, they had to depend on their own feelings, their gut feeling, their ability to understand that, oh, what they're saying is for this situation. So a lot of guessing. And these people here who studied, took courses, the whole complete courses, they were exposed to the language, but again, they didn't, maybe something was missing, something needed an extra that is not, it goes beyond the books. In technical terms, you can say that these people, they develop their language in an innate way, and these people here in an acquired way. So let's get to the point. How we develop language awareness. It doesn't matter if it was innate, based on your feelings and impressions. It doesn't matter if it was acquired, if you learned it in books or courses. Something that is extremely important is that you try to have insights. And in our training courses, we call those the ah moments. You know, when the student goes like, ah, I got it, or oh, or when you're watching TV and you learn a new expression that there's an equivalent in Portuguese, and you go, oh, that's how they say it. So these insights, they have to be triggered. So if you are abroad and you rarely have these insights, or you're reading and doing your grammar books and your activities in books, and you don't have these insight moments, it's unlikely you're developing language awareness and a certain autonomy. So these insights that happen unconsciously and casually, we have to try to make them a little bit more conscious and on purpose. So this is the trick. Insights, the ah moments that are unconscious and sporadic, you try to make them conscious and frequent. This theory, all these authors, they agree on this theory, and this is what they call knowledge about language as opposed to knowledge of language. So far, so good? Just give me a heads up, guys. And feel free to ask questions or ask me to go back any slide, okay? Nice. Carol Silva, is it the Carol that I'm thinking? Probably. Yes, Roger. Carl is the analyst. And through the analyst, you become a better user. You see how they go together. Roger is asking if Carl, remember in the first slides, here. Carl is the analyst, knowledge about the language. And through the analyst, you become a better user. And with these two in hands, you become a better teacher. Hi, Monica. Nice to see you. Nice. Okay, cool. Let's keep going. So I'll just give you some terminology because that's my routine. I love the terminology. In other words, language awareness is when you make the process unconscious, make it conscious. When your gut feeling actually becomes something principled, something studied, proven, with evidence. When the focus is not only on meaning, but there's a lot of focus on form as well. Meaning focused, it's like, you know, when you're reading a text and you tell your students or yourself, you say, okay, all I have to do is understand the general idea. So this is meaning focused. And of course, there are moments you are going to read for meaning, just for meaning. But if you're focusing on language awareness, you're going to go beyond. You're going to do some study on the form as well. And form includes not only grammar, but also discourse analysis, pronunciation. Everything would fall into this category. Or, like the authors said, knowledge of language, they become knowledge about language. In other words, implicit knowledge becomes explicit knowledge. So there you go. Language awareness is when you consciously, when you have the awareness that you have to make your implicit knowledge become explicit. There's something really nice that Ronald Carter said. He's one of my favorites, along with McCarthy. He said here, learning a language involves understanding something of that language. It is unlikely that such understanding can be developed by naturalistic exposure. It has to be quite explicit. So, you know, for the CELTA interview, especially for the CELTA interview, I always ask teachers, so how do you keep up with your English? How do you continue studying? And most of them, they say, oh, I watch a lot of movies. I read a lot. I read novels as well as theory. And I talk to foreigners. I have friends abroad, so forth, which is really nice. All of these options are really nice. But in order to make it more effective, the development of your English, you have to make it explicit. So you have to go beyond. And this is where we start now the practical terms. I thought this sentence was really nice. This one I borrowed from business, actually. It was a book about design thinking. So make thinking visible and active. Create a metacognitive process. Metacognitive, I put here a chichi. It's thinking about thinking, learning about learning. Sylvia said she lost the beginning of the course. Sylvia, it's being recorded. You can see it later. Yes. So make thinking visible. How do we do that? One way is to create metacognitive processes. That means like literally steps of what to do. Here's an example. So let's say you notice something new. That would be number one. Number two, you would do your research. Number three, you add it to your log, your personal log. And speaking of log, I think it's nice if you could have several. Some people they like one neat notebook. I say keep one in your phone, keep one at home, keep one at work. So anytime you see something, you can write it down. Later, you're going to retrieve and try to use it. And even later on, you're going to review and see if you remember. Rule of thumb, don't procrastinate notes and research. If you don't register, you will forget. Now, let me show you how this happened to me this week, this very week. Actually, it happens all the time, but this one was funny. I was a bit tired. I was looking for books for me to read over my break. I'm going to take a break next month. And as a fan of Stephen King, I wanted to read Dr. Sleep. So I went to Amazon and I clicked on reading side, and there's a sample there, and I started reading. It's super nice, by the way, if you like suspense and supernatural. And then I came across this sentence: the ring of the toilet was down. And I stopped for a second and I thought, the ring of the toilet, not the toilet seat. Because for me, I thought that the ring of the toilet was, you see this mark of dirty water, or I've already seen the ring of the toilet as the piece that connects the toilet and the ground. So I was like, okay, so the ring of the toilet, can I say that instead of this ring here of the toilet? So the second step is do your research. So I decided to look it up. Conclusions from the research. Ring of the toilet, not toilet ring. So first, moment. Okay, so if I say toilet ring, this is the toilet ring. It's literally that mark, that dirt, that disgusting watermark. But both are possible, ring of the toilet and toilet seat. And then a quick research in the COTE. Collocations: 1, ring of the toilet was up or down. And 2, sit on the toilet seat, not on the ring. Also, I did a little research on pictures. And I could see that most of the use of ring of toilet was like for training kids to use the toilet. So potty sitting, I don't know. So there you go. So I could have just written down the ring of the toilet. Okay, I understood from the context it's toilet seat. I could have stopped there. But ideally, you're going to go beyond. So you're going to do your research. Why not toilet seat? And if I can use both, where and when do I use each? So this one was one example. Another example here. A lot of teachers, they like to do grammar exercises, or sometimes they get CPE or CAE books, and which is really nice, and they start doing it from cover to cover. I love the idea. I always encourage my students to do that. So they answer the exercises, they check their answers, and stop here. So let's go beyond. To raise your awareness on your own, what you can do is raise more questions, and you can always doubt the answers. So it would be something like this. This is from Objective Proficiency, and it's a simple fill in the blanks exercise. You have to fill in the blanks with phrasal verbs. Here on the side, these are the answers. So technically, letter A, the answer is had been paid off. Their lives changed completely once the loan had been paid off, as it meant they could treat themselves to meals and weekends away. Okay, so question is, what if it wasn't a phrasal verb? What could I fill in here in this blank? So for me to answer that, I have to go to verbs that collocate or combine with loan. And that's when we go to, here's a nice collocation dictionary. If you're familiar with OSDIC, it's exactly the same as the Oxford Dictionary of Collocations. They just changed the interface. It looks more friendly. It looks nicer. But it's the same as the Oxford collocation Dictionary of Collocations. So I found there, instead of payoff, it could be underwritten, the loan had been underwritten, secured, or repaid. And then you keep asking questions. So what's the difference if your loan has been underwritten, secured, or repaid? I'll leave this as homework. You guys can check later. And then you keep going. So next question would be letter B. An old school friend tracked me down on the internet, and we met up recently to compare our life stories. So a friend tracked you down. First thing that popped my mind was that when you watch TV, if you're a fan of TV series and movies, most of the cases they use track you down is when somebody's really mad or angry, and they want to find somebody else and make things even. So I'm going to track you down even if you're in hell, and we're gonna have a talk or something like that. That's the use that I mostly know from track down. So next question would be, oh, sorry, this one. Oh. Okay, next question would be, what is the difference between track you down in a friendly context because they met up and had a coffee, or track you down if you want to make things even? Is it in an angry context or is it in a friendly context? So that's when you start to go to other sources like Thesaurus, Cambridge Dictionary. Sometimes what you can do is just write it down to Google with inverted commas, and will give you the frequent uses, and then you can compare. And then if you're a little bit more used to COCA, COCA, not cocaine, COCA, it's a database of how words are used in English. You can check the most frequent use of track down, track somebody down, or you raise more questions like, do I need this object here in the middle? Is it track down or track somebody down? Letter C, so on and so forth. Letter C is jump at. So the company offered Maria a post in the New York branch, and she jumped at the chance. Could I use other things here? The more questions you raise, the more you improve your repertoire. And I think it's interesting. We can do it for ourselves, and you can teach your students to do it. So going back here to making the process visual, this is what I meant. Grammar exercises or any kind of exercises. Answer, check answers, and always doubt the answers. Go further. Okay. Thank you, Jean-Franco. EnglishCorpora.org. English Corpora with a hyphen. You can find there. There are actually, I can leave later more websites. There's word frequency and some others. I could have added here. I forgot, guys. Okay. Next one. This one is interesting. It's when you write a movie review, storyline, or a synopsis on your own. Get a movie that you saw and you liked it, write it down. Then you find a review of the same movie online. It's probably going to be somebody very fluent or a native speaker writing about it. And what you do is you compare and you analyze which words the native speaker used and which ones you used or you could have used, and you make this analysis. And once you learn new words, you try it again. If you have a chance, write it down again and see how many of these you remember. It's kind of a reconstruction. We call it a reconstruction process. So for example, I think everybody's familiar with the Addams Family, right? So this one was recently in the movies. I didn't see it, but I asked somebody to write about it. This is a teacher. And look at her text. Completely comprehensible. I just crossed this out because in a storyline, usually you don't give away the end. But it's something that you can have this insight when you read other synopses, or not synopses, but other storylines and reviews. Usually people don't give away the end. So this is what she wrote. Then we went online and we found 3 other summaries of the story. And look how interesting. This is how she described the family, a strange, scary family. And then in this first example, members of the mysterious and spooky Addams family. And here, the eccentrically macabre family. And here too. So interestingly, we can see the eccentric would be a common adjective to define this kind of family, supposedly. Right. Next. Keep digging. She wrote, come live in the US in a nice area. And we could find moves to a bland suburb. Suburb is a name for a nice area. Or another way to say that, settle into their new home in New Jersey, near Karoishiyama. Perfect suburban community. And if you keep digging, you could go on for more TV stars. So instead of TV star, shady TV personality, Margot Needler. Hostile, conformist local reality show host, or home design TV personality. So this is another way for you to have the insights. You have most likely interesting and fluent and descriptive samples of language. I left here on the site the 3 that I used for these 3. I think these are the most popular ones. And as a second draft, she would have to rewrite her paragraph, reconstruct her paragraph using the new vocabulary. But it was really nice for her to see the other ways or more natural ways to describe. For example, a nice area, it would naturally come suburbs instead of rich. Oh, okay, you can say rich neighborhood, but suburbs, it's there, you know, it's nice, big houses. Okay. The next ones, it's more academic. If you're a fan of academic work, we're still taking notes in order to trigger insights. But the research now, it's a little bit different. One of them is called the contrastive analysis. So basically what you do is you compare the target language, the language you're learning or the studying, and your interlanguage. Interlanguage it's the area between what you know and what you're learning. So that's why interlanguage, between language 1 and language 2. So in this case here, the target language is clearly present perfect. And what the person already knew, which is part of our interlanguage, is that we don't use present perfect with specific time. And then after some research, we found out that yes, we do. Scott Thornbury mentions it actually even in a video. I think he's talking about tense and aspect. So can I say I visited Japan in 1995? You can. And most course books, they bring it as wrong, or they don't even mention it, as opposed to I visited Japan in 1995. So then we start the questions again. So what's the difference if I say I visited and I visited? And we go back to aspect. So the connectivity with the present, no connectivity with the present, so on and so forth. So this is called contrastive analysis. You just get 2 sentences of the same context, one from the target language, one from what you already knew, and you contrast. The next one is even nicer. It's one of my favorites, actually. It's like a puzzle. It's called Conformational Analysis. So what you do is you get here on the top of the column, as you see, all similar words: chair, stool, armchair, and bench. And then the question is, what's the difference? How can I explain to a student the difference between a stool and a chair and an armchair, a bench and a chair? So what you do is you list here semantic features. That means characteristics of all these words. The first one is the one that all of them, they must have in common. So all of them, they're seats. So when there's a plus, it means the characteristic is present. It's a yes. When it's a negative, it means it's a no. So a chair doesn't have an armrest. And when it's plus or minus, that means it could have an armrest or not. Then the insight will come in this way. Look at all the characteristics and the yeses and nos. And then let's look at stool, for instance. Which is the one characteristic that the stool has that the others don't? If you look at it, it's this line here. So it's a tall seat. So this is one good definition you can give to your students. If you're familiar with CCQs, concept checking questions, this is a way to create CCQs and check if the student understood. So if I say, okay, guys, so a chair, is it tall? If the student says yes, he didn't understand the concept. But if he says no, and for the stool, yes, that means he got the concept. Bench. What is the one characteristic that differs it from all of the others? We can point out this line here. So a bench is usually for more than one person, as opposed to a chair, a stool, and an armchair. It's usually for one person, and so on and so forth. So the componential analysis is like a puzzle, and you play with words. And of course, you can put here on top vocabulary or grammar. So for example, when you're teaching a student, the causative have in the passive voice. So for instance, I had my roof fixed. And here, I fixed my roof. And here, John fixed my roof. And then you put all the characteristics. Did I do it? Did I ask somebody to do it? Did I pay somebody to do it? And then with this analysis, he can start figuring out, or yourself start figuring out, the differences between the vocabulary or the grammar. It's a very nice puzzle to be done at home. Right. Next one. Tip 5, create opportunities. Now, something more on a daily basis. How do we make implicit knowledge more explicit? Of course, exposure is really important. It's key. So if you're going to read something, try to read it in the original in English if you have a chance. This is funny. Set your cell phone or apps or your commands in your computer to English. And then you start having more insights like, oh, so I don't know, delete is delete, it's the same, or include is add, or you start making associations. That's really nice. Given a choice, travel to English-speaking countries, if you have a chance, of course. The more exposed you are, the better. Explore different genres and areas. This is key as well, especially non-scripted. I meant here, most teachers, they say, oh, I read a lot and I watch a lot of movies and series. Okay, try to get exposed to, for example, shows that are not scripted, like interviews. Because then the English is more natural. The speed is different from a movie in which the actor rehearsed and he actually memorized some words. When it's more authentic, you get a different repertoire of material for you to have insights. Expose yourself to different accents. And number 5 here, I know there are many courses out there that are called accent reduction. I'm kind of against them. I think it should be the opposite. It's okay for you to work on your accent, but it doesn't have to be perfect. I think the movement has to be different. It has to be the opposite. Expose yourself to different accents, and as long as it's comprehensible, you're not mispronouncing things, it's all right. Number 6, talk to people, exchange ideas, and make sure you have feel for research. So for instance, I hope that after this talk, this webinar, you have enough feel to keep you entertained for some time studying on your own. Once you start doing all of these things you learn will start popping everywhere. I had once a tutor, he said, it's just like when you buy a new car. So let's say I don't know, I buy a Honda Fit today. So I did my research, I love the car and I bought the car. Once I know the car and I bought it and I have it, I use it, I start seeing Honda Fits everywhere. It's the same thing with language awareness. So once you learn something, you notice something, it starts popping everywhere. For me, it happened with the intrusive in the British accent. Never in my life. I even doubted the person who first taught me that between certain sounds, the British, they include a sound. I really doubted it. But after I raised my awareness, I did my research, why it happens, why is it only British, and between which sounds and so on. Every movie that I watch, or the BBC News, or anything that is British accent, it's all the time. You can start identifying it all the time. It's really nice, and it's a nice feeling. That means your language awareness is active. It's working. The next one, tip number 6. Before teaching a class, learn everything you can about that target language. So if you guys have taken the CELTA, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, I think it's a unique experience. When you take the CELTA, one of the sections of your lesson plan is to do your language analysis, and it looks like something like this. So you analyze meaning, form, pronunciation, and you anticipate problems and solutions. So I put here an example, the modal perfect should have. So it means regret if you use with I and we, and it means judgment or a feeling of sorry if you use with the other subjects. That's a nice, clear meaning. And then you keep going. What about the form? This part here is tricky for the question because most people can make the affirmative and negative, but when it comes to the question, is it what should I have done, or what should have I done? The have comes after or before. So a little bit of analysis of form, pronunciation. I am particular and enthusiastic for pronunciation. So the connected speech, and if it's in a sentence, which words should I stress? The should, the have, or all of them, or none of them? And then you anticipate problems and solutions. And it's nice because the moment you start anticipating problems, you kind of solve these problems for yourself as well. So when will students confuse it with an advice, or can I say it's an advice in the past or not, and so on and so forth. And then after you teach your lesson, you're going to collect the questions that the learners brought up. So here was one that came up during this lesson. He could have done that before. Is a judgment too, isn't it? He could have done that before. Do I have to use should have? Sorry guys, can you still hear me? I ran out of battery. When I Was Your Man by Bruno Mars. Great for teaching that. Nice take today. So after you hold on, let me turn on